Welcome. Welcome to worship, my friends. Welcome to this online opportunity to spend time together on Palm Sunday with God and everyone else that watches this video. As I created the worship center and cut the palms and prepared them this morning, I am so aware that we are not physically together, and so aware that in our separation, we are reaching out to each other in spirit and in prayer. We here at the First Church of the Brethren are a faith community deeply rooted in the Anabaptist tradition. And as a part of that tradition, we believe that Jesus is the center of our faith, community is the center of our life, and reconciliation is the center of our work. And we live these three values as a faith community who pursues justice and offers hospitality as another way of living. How are you this morning? Can you feel the excitement and tension building as we begin this Passion Week? This year will be very different as we come together on Thursday for our Maundy Thursday service, a reenactment of the Upper Room and John 13. And it will be different as we look forward to our Easter Sunday services. I'm reminded that a faith community is not a building. We are the people gathered online and around the world following in the footsteps of Jesus. Look for our Maundy Thursday service email to come your way Thursday morning. And that evening, let's join together for a time of remembrance. You might have some bread and water, crackers, juice, something available as we experience a time together in the Upper Room. We'll share in a time of confession. We'll share in a time of service and fellowship. And then we'll conclude our evening with bread and cup and special music by Oren Scala. We'll take the common that evening and we'll break it together, and blessing it as a community, we will share the symbols of Christ's love and Christ's life. Welcome. Welcome to worship. Today's the celebration of Palm Sunday. Oftentimes there's a lot of movement in worship today as we remember Jesus' entrance with the cloths and the palm tree, the palm branches. And we remember the voices of those who lined the streets welcoming Jesus into town. The voices that shouted, "Hosanna in the highest," remembering Jesus' presence. And this past week, you've had the opportunity to see Jesus in many different ways. You've been able to hear the voice of love through Jesus' presence in others as you've shared with them online, as you've talked to them on the phone, as perhaps you've yelled across the fence to hear and see how your neighbors are doing. In a time of physical isolation, we may not have the chance to always share the appreciation that we feel at the conclusion of one of those conversations. So as we think about the gratitude, as we think about celebrating, and as we think about the wonderful opportunities of our congregation to support one another, I invite you to think about how you've heard the voice of Jesus this week, that voice of love that Jesus offers. And when you've thought of that, I invite you to shoot a text, shoot an email, take the opportunity to write a card to someone that has been that voice for you this week, and share with them a word of appreciation, a text of encouragement, and let them know that you've been thinking about them, that you appreciate what they've done for you, and that you care deeply for who they are as a person. Take a moment and tell them what they did that touched your heart. And when you're ready, rejoin us for a time of community togetherness. Listen to the sound of the fountain. Find some rest in it. Guide of our hearts, lead us in peace. On this Palm Sunday, we begin another Passion Week. Give us the joy in our hearts while we shout Hosanna, and peace in our lives as we face the unknown. As we await the servant leader's presence, create spaces for us to serve. When life takes unexpected turns and we move to adjust, may we find the hope of an Easter promised and the gift of peace beyond understanding. Guide of our life, lead us in peace. Amen. This morning, we're going to continue our walk through Mark. We're going to skip back a little bit to Mark 11 and share in the triumphant entry as that text shares it, and then move up into Mark 14. So hear these words from the Gospel of Mark. When they had gotten close to Jerusalem, near the two villages of Bethphage and Bethany, in the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his followers ahead of them. "Go to that village over there," he said, "and as soon as you get into the town, you'll see a young colt tied that nobody has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it back to me. If anybody stops you and asks, 'What are you doing?' just say, 'The Lord needs it,' and he will send it back right after he's done." Everything happened just as Jesus had told them. They found the colt in the street, tied near a door, and they untied it. And the bystanders asked them, "What are you doing?" And they answered as Jesus had instructed and were allowed to take it. So they brought the colt back to Jesus, piled garments on its back to make a comfortable seat, and Jesus rode the animal toward Jerusalem. As they traveled, people cast their cloaks onto the road and spread out leafy branches which they had brought from the fields along the way. People walked ahead of them and others followed behind. The people shouted, "Hosanna! Rescue us now, Lord! Hosanna! Blessed be the one who comes in the name of the Eternal One. And blessed is the kingdom of our father David, which draws closer to us today. Hosanna in the highest heavens." And then on to 14. While Jesus was eating dinner in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came into the house carrying an alabaster flask filled with precious, sweet-smelling ointment made from spikenard. She came to Jesus, broke the jar, and gently poured out the perfume onto his head. Some of those around the table were troubled by this and grumbled to each other. "Why did she waste that precious ointment? We could have had sold this ointment for almost a year's wages, and the money could have gone to the poor." Their private concerns turned to public criticism against her. And Jesus' response was, "Leave her alone. Why are you attacking her? She has done a good thing. The poor will always be with you, and you can always show kindness to them wherever you want. But I won't always be with you. She has done what she could for me. She has come to anoint my body and prepare it for burial. Believe me when I tell you that this act of hers will be told in her honor as long as there are people who tell the good news." This week, I've been thinking about boundaries. This week, I've been thinking about how life has changed in the last 3 weeks. I've been thinking about what I grew up with and what's now my reality. Maybe you grew up with the same kind of things that I did, and that is, the Christian ethic of taking care of one another and putting others before yourself, and if someone's sick, taking a casserole to them, or if someone's sick, calling and seeing what's up and how you can help, and then run right over, maybe clean a house or do the laundry or those kinds of things. The norm for the Christian life was to be present and be that life of Christ, share the love that God offers. Well, in this day and age, I'm learning that things are changing. This past week, one of the community members brought some food over, and I was taking it out to our asylum seekers. And it was a beautiful afternoon. I walked down, handed them, the sandwich meat and the cheeses and all that kind of thing, had a great conversation. And it was wonderful to be able to share in that way. The next day, I get a phone call from our Oasis shelter director, and she shares with me that the husband of the woman that I was talking to yesterday left to go to get medical help. He had a really bad headache, and of course that's one of the things with COVID virus. So as she and I talked, we decided to go into quarantine mode here on campus and to start cleaning down and thinking about what that would mean and who we needed to call and how we would put that into action. And as we were moving through that, I recognized within myself the fact that I had done what I thought was the Christian norm shared, and now I could be infected with COVID-19. But not only that, I would put my family at risk if I went home. So I started thinking about what it would look like to live in the office for 3 to 5 days. And it was an incredibly weird experience to think about all that. Within 3 hours, I had received a call back, and they said it was just a false alarm. But it really got me to thinking about how we as Christians are supposed to act in this day and age, and how we care for one another. And I think about, Jesus and these two scriptures, and how does it all fit together? And then, I thought about Jesus and how he had his, the context in which he lived. He had physical limitations or guidelines. He had an understanding of his faith and how he would live his faith. And so he lived within those. And here he is coming in to Jerusalem with the understanding of who he is, and the people are welcoming him. Hosanna in the highest, blessed be the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And it puts him in direct tension with another entry into Jerusalem that is filled with military grandeur and the pomp and circumstance of power. And it's a political tension. And it's maybe not one that he wanted to be involved with, but he was, and it put him at odds. And the norm of what the people were thinking for him was kind of broken. And then you look at the text at the end in 14 with the woman and Jesus. Jesus comes in and he sits down and he's eating with Simon the leper. Well, right there's probably a break. He was a leper and he's still known as a leper, so he's marginalized. And Jesus eats with the marginalized, which is not the norm, perhaps, for believers of his faith, for the scribes and the Pharisees. It's not wise to eat with marginalized or to be with them. And then in comes this woman, right? Probably not invited. I don't know. And she brings this alabaster jar over to Jesus, and she breaks the jar and she anoints him. And I don't know that Jesus knew that was going to happen. He probably watched it unfold. It's definitely not the norm for dealing with women in his culture. And so there are norms that are changed and transformed. Jesus eats with marginalized. Jesus values the actions of the woman. Jesus defends the actions of the woman and sees it as a gift for him as he moves into the next part of what might happen, his burial. He deals with emotional, physical, spiritual norms, and he changes them, he flips them for the benefit of the people of God, and demonstrating God's love in that. So these two texts share how Jesus changes norms to bring his story, to shape his story as it moves forward. And I think about that as we're involved in our lives today, as we're involved with the COVID virus, and as we're involved with being the voice of God, sharing the love of Christ. I think about what kind of norms might we have to change. And I know we've already changed to online worship. That's a different norm. Worship isn't the same because we're not together physically, but we are spiritually connected. God is alive in our community and in our times together. We need to continue to wonder what norms need to be changed. And maybe we can no longer run right over to do laundry, or we can no longer meet to make food in the house, but we can still care for one another by taking toilet paper and leaving it on a porch, or sharing a casserole, leaving it on the porch, or getting groceries for someone and leaving it on the porch, maintaining that physical distance, because it's critical to the very health of our community. I had the idea that I was doing God's work in taking the food down, and I was. But I didn't have to physically be close enough to our guests to be able to share God's love. I could have easily just left it. And then I wouldn't put them at risk. I wouldn't put me at risk. What are the norms that we have to think about breaking, changing, transforming, so that Jesus' love can be shared in ways that are healthy, in ways that give all people life? So as I invite you to think a little bit about that. I invite you to take your journal, your pen, your pencil, and think about the questions. What are the norms that are being reshaped in my life so that God's love can be shared? And how can you continue to share God's love as those norms are reshaped? What are the spiritual boundaries? What are the physical boundaries, the emotional boundaries? What are those norms that need to be changed in order for us to continue to follow Jesus? Sharing God's love, sharing God's care for the world. You can if you so choose, turn the video off now. Journal about those questions, thinking about the changes that are happening in your life, in your faith, in your walk with God, that can move you on to a new space and place. Thank you for sharing in those conversations. Thank you for wondering about the norms that need to change. We are at a new place and space. Christ is entering our lives to transform us, and we need to be open and ready. Hear this song as we close together. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Blessings, God's peace. Amen.